So hello, my name is Guy Rogers and I'm going to be your MC today. The presentations today will mostly be in English. We are here to showcase 6 projects about identity and belonging in the English-speaking communities of Quebec. Many of you know something about the community projects because you were involved in one way or another. The 6 community groups that have worked on these projects are BCRC, the Black Community Resource Center, ELAN, the English Language Arts Network, and I should mention in passing that I'm also the project manager for ELAN, so I will make a couple of appearances later on in that capacity. The other partners are LEARN, the leading English education and resorts network, QUESCREN, the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network, Seniors Action Quebec, and Youth for Youth, aka Y for Y. That's a lot of acronyms, I know, and we're not quite done yet. Concordia University has been responsible for oversight and financial management of the project, and QUESCREN, the Quebec English-speaking Communities Research Network, has been responsible for overall management, coordination, as well as hiring and staff supervision. As you can see, there are many partners involved in these projects, but none of this would be possible without funding. The community project was funded by the Secrétariat for Relations with English-speaking Quebecers, or le Secrétariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise. 2 people from the Secretariat are here to provide some insight into why they thought this project about identity and belonging in the English-speaking communities of Quebec is important. So it is my pleasure to welcome M&A Christopher Skeet, adjoint parlementaire du Premier ministre pour les relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise, et adjoint parlementaire du ministre responsable de la lutte contre le racisme. If we were in a pre-pandemic room, I would ask you to give him a round of applause. But today on Zoom and Facebook, I'll just ask you to give him a friendly wave. So can we see some welcoming hands? Mr. Skeet, over to you.
Thank you so much, Guy, for the introduction. I'm pleased to be here with you to celebrate this com-unity project that highlights and amplifies the important sense of belonging for the English speakers in Quebec. And I think it's important for all of us to recognize that it's important to belong in Quebec. It's been one of the focal points of my efforts since I was elected in 2018. As many of you know, in the fall of 2019, the Secretariat and we went across Quebec to meet the representatives of various organizations and institutions in the English-speaking communities in order to get their feedback and also their advice on what the future of the Secretariat's help and orientations and priorities should be. And that's what we're celebrating today. That's why we're here today. It's a direct result of those consultations, and it's fun to see, all the hard work that goes into preparing one of these consultations, the actual work of being there, and then of course to see the community reunited in this way following those consultations is why we do what it is that we do. The main findings of the consultations were, of course, summed up in a report prepared by Dr. Frances Ravensbergen, but also in her report, she came up with those 8 famous key messages. And those key messages are what make it possible for us to orient our activities. Now, a few others required some reflections, some of those orientations and how we can move forward on those. But really what they made us realize is that there's some trust issues, some institutional trust issues that the government of Quebec has to address. And I'll get to those a little bit later, but we also use those recommendations to feed last year's budget and the year before's budget. A lot of you may not know because it was right around the time that the pandemic hit, but we provided funding for senior wellness centers in the 2019-2020 budget, and there should be some good news coming out of that shortly. We also in that budget were able to secure funds for the employability strategy, and that's $7 million over 5 years, because of course we recognize that there are gaps for the English community in terms of accessing employment in various ways, be they language barriers, be they professional recognition barriers, be they just the ability to understand what's going on around them and in order to find out what those opportunities are. that's what PERT's going to be working on to make sure that the English community is able to do better and stay in Quebec and be successful in Quebec. And although we were, of course, excited and proud that we were able to get that money, one thing is that remained unaddressed was that sense of feeling welcome in Quebec, and I've heard that. I've heard you. I know it's a big deal that, you know, the past 50 years between passage of Bill 101, between the sovereignist movement, between this, you know, having to choose between our home and our flag. I know it's been divisive for a lot of people, and you told us that in those consultations. Sometimes the English community doesn't feel understood by the Francophone majority, or sometimes they feel that their contributions to the wider society are not seen or understood or recognized. And so all this contributes to a weak sense of belonging. And this project is actually here to help you guys get a sense of that ownership of what it is to be un Québécois, d'expression anglaise. So it's very, this is good news, and we should celebrate the fact that we're able to be together. And I'm looking forward to hearing all about what you guys are working on and what we could do better and what we can do together going forward. So thank you again for having me. Thank you for letting me speak to you today. Congratulations on the organization of a wonderful event. Thank you to the Secretariat and the team for organizing it and funding it and getting this off the ground. And you guys just keep doing you, because we're profoundly proud of you, and I'm super happy to be here. So enjoy your meeting.
Thank you, Christopher. That was very compelling words there. The existence of the Secretariat has made an enormous difference, and I hope you can stick around today and see these the projects that are being presented, and then maybe later on look at them in some more detail. So now I would like to introduce Mr. William Flock, Secrétaire adjoint ministère du Conseil exécutif, Secrétaire aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise. And again, can we give him a warm wave of welcome?
That's fun. Thank you, Guy. I'm going to just maybe add a couple of sort of details to what Christopher said, because of course I'm more on the administrative side of projects like this. And I think it's worth noting that from our point of view, as Christopher pointed out, we heard in the consultation that this was an area that that was underappreciated and kind of a problem, like a kind of almost a crisis in a certain way. And in terms of then to say, well, how do you build a stronger sense of belonging? How do you build up a sense of collective pride in being English-speaking Quebecers, when of course the community is so diverse regionally, ethnically, and so on. So I think our starting point was to reflect on the organizations that were most likely to be able to play a role and make a contribution. So naturally, arts, culture, heritage, education, groups working in those sectors really sort of sprang to mind, but also groups working on behalf of different population segments, youth, seniors, Blacks. So one way or another, we started to have conversations just within a couple of months, or rather interactions within a couple of months of our consultations with organizations, the ones that the Guy listed. And it all came to pass rather quickly, and that's one of the things that we really respect and enjoy in working with the English-speaking communities, is there's often a flexibility and agility. So ultimately, we signed an agreement in March of 2020 with QUESCREN, who then in turn signed agreements with the 6 partner organizations. So I just want to highlight that partnership approach. So at one level, it's a partnership between the Secretariat and QUESCREN. At another level, it's a partnership between QUESCREN and its 6 participating organizations. But at another level, it's a partnership between QUESCREN, those 6 networks, and their members. So at the end of the day, what we see is that there are more than 70 organizations, counting schools and historical societies and museums and you know, youth cultural ambassadors across the regions that are active and participating in this project, which from our point of view, with a small team of 6 people at the time, we couldn't imagine how we could mobilize resources except through that kind of chain of partnership. So we know that sometimes that can make things complicated. It's not always obvious. Sometimes there are some hiccups, including a major one, the pandemic. But we've been very impressed with how people have worked in good faith, have worked together to overcome the various hurdles that we've approached. And yeah, we're very excited and proud of what this project has brought. I wanted to maybe just pass there to, I did mention that we've got more than 70 different points of activity, and there's probably more than that, but a minimum of 70, I would say. And I'm going to ask my colleague, Ellie Chu, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to her to just give a quick demo of an online resource that we've developed that helps situate where this project is active, but also it's a work in progress, but would give everybody the ability to sort of connect to the organizations that mounted the projects. So can I pass over to you now, Ellie?
No, but of course.
No? All right, so maybe you can share your screen. So Ellie works with us in research, but she's a data wizard, so we're very pleased to have her contribution.
Oh, that's a title I have to live up to, don't I? Thank you, Mr. Fluck. So as he has explained, we had tried to demonstrate the reach of this project through this dashboard that we have created. On here, you can see that we have identified the location of all the projects. Oh, I should probably mention this is a very interactive dashboard we're working on. So on the map, you can zoom in on the area. You can select the actual partner association organization. It will show the list of the locations, as well as provide the internet address, the websites, as well as an address, the physical address. So to help identify the type of projects, the regions of the projects, we have created a few menus that will help localize them. So we can always select by administrative region. By doing so, the map will zoom into the area and will identify the partners as well as the organizations for each one. You can always select more than one location. You can always select multiple. You can reset everything. And to help with to identify the activity sector, we also have this menu. So if you want to identify all the educational facilities, all the schools that partook in this project, selecting education, the list on the right will update to show all the schools. The map will update to show all the locations, and we can even just identify, let's say, the project sponsored by ELAN. And if we select it, it will show the location of the facility. I think that is pretty much my presentation. I'll turn this back to Mr. Flock.
Without intentionally designing the project this way, when we do think about sense of belonging, often it's ultimately becomes related to youth. It's, in part, it's the notion of how do we build a sense of pride in being an English-speaking Quebecer that will encourage people to look for a future in Quebec, or if they leave, feel like they want to come back, all that kind of notion, right? So ultimately, because of the active participation of Learn in this project, and also Youth for Youth, what we find is there's a lot of the projects that are oriented towards young people, and of course the education system was a really big player, and we really appreciate their collaboration in this project. But as a, for instance, we can also look at it from the point of view that Ellie, maybe just show the Commission Scolaire pull-down menu. So, and like another way of looking at the data is to say, if we pick a school board territory, let's say Eastern Township School Board, they would then be in that region, and you can see that Youth for Youth has a youth ambassador working in the area. There's a number of Quan projects as well as education projects. So it enables, for example, the community sector and the education sector to kind of know each other better if they want to explore. I mean, I'm not saying that it's only through this project that those bonds get built, but one of the things that we've been encouraged to see is how much collaboration there's been between the different networks, and it's certainly something that I think we want to encourage and support. So I'll leave it at that and maybe turn it back to you, Guy. But thank you, Ellie. And it goes without saying that we're both very proud of the project, but we're also very interested in getting more, I guess, a more up close look at the various activities. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Ellie. So we're going to be looking at the projects that were done last year. At the end of this session, We're going to have a preview of the projects that are being developed this year. We're going to end with a Q&A, so you can ask questions. The contact information for our publicist and our project managers has been already shared in chat. It'll be shared again later on, so you can contact anybody about specific projects. And so let us begin. We're going to look at these projects under 3 different themes. The first we're going to look at is belonging and identity. So now I come from the world of art and culture, and people often say to me, I don't know anything about art, but I know what I like. And you know, we spent a lot of time debating what we meant by belonging and identity. And I'm not sure that we came up with a definitive explanation, but we all know when we feel welcome. So sit back and relax. In this first section, we are going to showcase the work of 5 groups under the theme belonging and identity.
Going into a country life brought out a side of me that I didn't have a chance to explore before that. I really started to spend a lot of time in the outdoors, fishing and camping. I don't know, for some reason I was always in the end drawn to the ocean. So I started with my own fishing business. In the beginning, when I started fishing, I didn't have the background. I was a greenhorn to it, and it was the butt of a lot of jokes, you know, about whether I was going to make it or not. But within a few years, I was leading the pack most of the time, because I was going in severe weather conditions way more. There were a lot of times when I was the only one on the water for longer hours.
I've never felt like an outsider. Not in Quebec, not in England, not in France. I think it's very much a question of person's personality. How well you adapt, how well you integrate is part of who you are. And some people are more open, and I don't at all feel an outsider. Have never felt an outsider anywhere I've lived. Quebec is my home because my husband is at home here. And you create a home in an environment in which you are completely at ease. And we are at ease here, both of us.
I always found things to draw from the years of traveling and carrying my sketchbook around. When I came around here, it was like my role in the place. You know, somebody might be the guy who owns the grocery store, the hardware store, or somebody had a farm here. They had their identities in a way. Well, my identity was the artist. And all the kids in the school knew me as the artist. And sometimes if I met somebody I didn't know, and they said, "What's your name?" I say, "Oh, Dennis Palmer." I say, "Oh, you're the artist." Many years ago, I was wanting to belong to somewhere. And now I don't ask that anymore. And I don't feel that urge. I say, well, here I am. There's not more I can do to belong here other than die and put her ashes on the garden.
Now we're going to a video from BCRC.
Talia, what has struck you, or what have you taken away? I think I've taken away a lot of things, but I think the most important for me is, as a mixed race person too, the feeling of belonging is something that is very rare for me to feel. And connecting with my ancestor, which was an ancestor that was very grounded in who he was, it helped me learn how to feel like I belong. And it's a feeling that is very new to me and very beautiful. And I was expecting the process to be very painful, but at the end, a lot easier. But it was a mix of a lot of different things, and I didn't expect that. So I left feeling everything more profoundly, and I didn't expect that.
The Arrivals Belonging project that I was a part of was really life-altering for me. I had been dancing around my identity for a really long time. I even wrote a play about it. I'm mixed race. I was born in Montreal. My mom was born in Montreal too. She's Francophone. My father was born in Trinidad and Tobago and came to Montreal in the mid-1960s, where he met my mom. And so as I was growing up, we spent a lot of time with Caribbean families more than anything else. And I didn't have any questions about my identity at that point. I felt I was in a Caribbean environment and I didn't have to explain myself. But as I got older and entered new environments in our society, people mislabeled me, people made assumptions about me, people even argued about what my identity was. Unfortunately, it took me a long time to figure out that Trinidad was like home. It feels like home to me. When I went back a couple of years ago, the nature, the trees, everything that my family talks about, that my grandmother and grandfather had in their backyard, on their property, everything seems so real to me. And I discovered these things through the Belonging Project. I am a person who belongs in Quebec. I was born here, so nobody can change that. But what the program confirmed for me through my exploration of my grandmother is the discovery of these deep connections that I have to her and to her experiences and to her home and to the land that she lived on in San Juan, Port of Spain. I hear the rooster call the sun, the morning birds, the hummingbirds, the pigeon peas have made a wall of green in front of the house. Our blessed place. Avocado, oranges, eggplant, coffee beans, cocoa beans. These memories were really real for me. She had a special needs child, David, who died very young. He was never well. He never learned to walk or speak even at 4 or 5 years old. I have a son who's also special needs. And upon that discovery that we had something that we both shared, it was very profound. David looked like an angel. Perfect, smooth skin, so soft. Big eyes, really like a little angel. Vaya con Dios, mi amor. You gave us joy and filled our hearts the short time you were here. Cariño, frágil, mi angelito, mi corazón. It was really, really magical, actually. You know, they talk about generational trauma. It's in our genes. We carry our ancestors in our bodies, and that has become so real for me. It's so important. So it's not a conclusion. Yes, I belong as a person who really identifies with her Trini culture and Trini roots. I belong there, but I live here, so I belong here as well. But I don't. You can't make me feel shame, or you can't put down my culture or where my people come from. I feel really strongly about that, and I feel it's important for me to know I belong here in Quebec with the things that I carry with me from Trinidad and Tobago. It's a process that's going to continue. That's not over.
So the next video is going to be from ELAN. And I'm speaking now as ELAN's project manager. We approached the question of belonging and identity via waves of immigration. To do that, we created 6 discussion groups. The first group was families that arrived in Quebec prior to 1945, because prior to the Second World War, English speakers were by far the largest minority in Quebec. The second group we brought together was families that arrived in Quebec during the period 1945 to 1970. 2 interesting things happened during that period. Allophones, immigrants, immigrants whose mother tongue is neither English nor French, started to become the largest minority in Quebec. And most of those who arrived here were not Catholic, and they were excluded from the Catholic/French school system. The large number of allophones who were anglicized created a demographic time bomb. The third group we brought together was families that arrived between the FLQ crisis of 1970 and the second referendum in 1995. 3 interesting things happened during that period. Bill 101 diffused the demographic time bomb by obliging newly arrived allophones and anglophones from outside of Canada to be educated in French. All the groups of anglophones and allophones responded to the changes in 2 ways. About 250,000 people left Quebec, while most of those who stayed embraced the new social contract. We also interviewed 2 groups that arrived after 1995 who had very different experiences, and we devoted an entire episode to regional communities which have a dramatically different reality from Montreal. The video we're about to see presents a few of the people from the first 4 waves of immigration. All right, Norma, take it away.
On my mother's side, my mother's name was Parkinson, and her grandfather, he came from Lancashire, and he arrived in the 1820s approximately in Rawdon.
My great-great-grandfather came from St. Thomas in 1846. Where do I not feel at home? And I think that happens in every part of this beautiful city when people immediately ask me, what island are you from? And I have to respond, the island of Montreal.
But at one point I was walking in the street and I went, why did that person call me a tit carré, you know? And Anglo. I said, I don't have an ounce of English blood in me. It's Slovak, Chinese, French, Scottish, and whatever, maybe Russian, I don't know. And it made me realize that it's because of the language that someone's talking to me like that. So there's a huge misunderstanding of why we're speaking English. And it's got nothing to do with our blood for a lot of us, you know?
Grandparents spoke perfect French, perfect Moroccan French, not Québécois French. But the thing is that they came here and then it was a product of the government policies that we ended up speaking English. My grandparents had to learn English. There was no English in their household. They spoke French and they spoke French to my parents. But my parents then, my dad went to an English school. And even beyond that, it's many people have been speaking about it, how the Catholic school system wouldn't take the Jews, so the Protestant school system would take the Jews.
I want to say that I always found it interesting that in Montreal, there were the French Canadians who were Catholic. There were all the immigrants who were not, like Jewish people, Greek Orthodox, who wound up at the Protestant school board. And then there were the non-Francophone Catholics, like the Italians, who didn't really have a spot. So we ended up with the an English sector, the English sector of the Montreal Catholic School Commission. Why this happened, and I think Quebec is still in denial about this.
You know, I was 8 years old. So obviously, for me, it's like, wow, it's like a new adventure. I've never seen so many white people in my life. But as a child, I thought it was hard because we went to those classes d'accueil to make sure that we understood French. And from there, it didn't take long. We started regular school, but I remember being bullied because I didn't know how to speak Québécois. The only French I knew was from the Tintin, right? Saperlipopette, zut alors. And then you don't speak like that in the schoolyard because you get beat up really fast. And that's what happened to me. So it was tough to try to speak like them.
We arrived under the auspices that my parents' French proficiency would work out well for them here. My mother was a French teacher, but as an immigrant, no one would give her a job as a French teacher. There were 4 of us living in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, all on top of each other. I was held back a year in school and put in a classe d'accueil. I felt alienated from everyone around me because my French was really non-existent at that point.
And I think my pivotal moment came when I took on Canadian citizenship, because to me, I questioned myself. First of all, I had a huge problem with taking the oath to the Queen, because I'm like, well, I come from a colony and we fought against the monarchy, and now I'm going to take the oath to the Queen. So there was that philosophical dilemma, which I find is so absurd. But anyways, then the whole idea, what would be my identity, my hyphenated identity? Would I be Canadian Indian? Would I be Indian Canadian? Would I just be Canadian? Would I be a Quebecois?
My policy for the last couple of years is really to come uninvited to the table, knock on the door, crash the door down, crash the party, but always make sure that I bring something, right? Like any family or any meal, you've got to bring something that you can contribute, that you can use to enrich that experience. So whether they like me or not, I would rather be there at the table so they can hate me and tell me to my face, or tell me your food stinks, or I love your food, so that at least being there, but I can belong to something. And so in that sense, I now can say that I really feel I belong to Montreal, and Montreal belongs to me.
How strongly do you feel you belong in Quebec?
So now we're going to hear from Youth for Youth. They have a lovely video for us.
Hello. My name is Holly Nadeau, and I am the project coordinator for Y for Y Quebec's You Are Here, the Belonging Project. The goal of this project is to foster an intergenerational conversation between youth, seniors, and community organizations. In order to achieve this goal, we worked with 7 different youth from 6 regions of Quebec. These regions included Montreal, Gaspé, Lower North Shore, Eastern Townships, Outaouais, and Quebec City. Each of these youth organized virtual events that tell us the rich history, culture, and communities that are in their regions. Some of these events included poetry nights, trivia nights, and informational conversations with those who work in the heritage, culture, and art sectors. Throughout the project, we wanted to make sure youth came out and learned a little bit about their regions and to teach others about their regions. As youth in Quebec, we felt that this project would also help strengthen a sense of belonging to the province, especially during this time. We talked with 4 youth who are part of this project to tell us their experience about being on the project, what sense of belonging means to them, and why it is important. 3 of these youth were representatives who worked with us throughout the project, also known as Youth Cultural Ambassadors, and 1 is a volunteer for Y for Y Quebec and continues to be a volunteer for Y for Y Quebec. Our wonderful podcaster for C'est La Vie, Sam, will be facilitating this event. I'll be passing the mic off to him.
So hi everyone, we're going to be talking a bit about the Belonging Project and some of the results that came out of that, but I want to start this conversation off by asking you guys to explain a bit about yourself. Tell the people who you are, tell them what you do and how you've been involved in the Belonging Project.
I'm Hanley Etheridge. I'm from the Lower North Shore.
I'm Emma McGinnis. I'm from the Gaspé Z.
So my name is Michael Goveo. I was born in the Philippines.
All right, so my name is Magda, and I'm actually very new to the province, still finding my footing.
Tell me what the sense of belonging means to you. Emma, you come from Ontario, and so that transition to going into Gaspé and finding, a sense of belonging there. How important was that to you, and how did you come about it?
I feel like it's extremely important. I went to school in Ottawa, and I feel like I never really felt that, and it makes you kind of feel like lonely, or like you can't attach yourself to the region like you, or like the area that you live. And I feel like Gaspé, that was something that was important for me to actually make it feel like it's my home. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me to feel like a sense of belonging here was to make it feel like home.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it was the people that drove that? Do you think it was just that overwhelming sense of like friendly community?
Yeah, definitely. Like my partner, his brother has a girlfriend and she's mainly French, and she was so welcoming. Like she literally was like, "You're gonna be my best friend. Like, come on, like just join my friend group." And her and her friends literally just like were like, "Come on, you can." And even though they speak like predominantly French, they were so welcoming, and having that friend group like almost immediately really helps you settle in and not feel like an outsider. Really, it's like you have those connections already in the community. Definitely helps.
Oh, it's super important. When I lived, again, like Emma said, I also went to the University of Ottawa, so I lived in the Gatineau region for 5 years, and I had family there, so it made it easier, but I never felt like I belonged there. Felt like I just lived there. And coming home, I mean, obviously I felt like I belonged here. I was born and raised here, but even for people who come in and work, we have a lot of people who come in from Quebec and Montreal and other places to work here, and so many decide to stay because we're so welcoming, and it's such a different dynamic, and we help people feel like they belong. And I think it's super important, and yeah, it's a huge part of someone's happiness as well. Like Emma
Yeah.
said, like you can be lonely if you don't feel like you belong, but I feel like it's very hard to feel lonely around here because you're always surrounded by people who care for you.
I think very, as our identity is shaped by our environments, and if we feel like we belong somewhere, we don't belong somewhere, we internalize those feelings, and that's how we present ourselves to others. When we belong, we make connections with each other. It shows that we're not alone. Like our identities are all unique, but we do have a collective identity as well. Quebec is an extremely old province. There's a lot of history here. Anglophones have just as much place here as Francophones, and it's hard sometimes to live and find our footing together, especially to follow the language laws, but that's what makes us unique, you know? I'm not the only one who speaks another language other than French and English. That is another identity that many people like myself do bring into Quebec. It's something that makes the culture of Quebec so much more richer and so much more beautiful. I wish more provinces were like Quebec because so many people are bilingual here, and it's so great. You can switch around. You can whoever you're talking to, you can switch and talk to them in different languages. The rest of Canada does. I feel like the rest of Canada is more limited in that compared to Quebec. Yeah. So I think belonging and identity definitely go in together, because when you belong somewhere, that enriches your identity because you can connect with others for sure.
Amazing. Well, let's turn gears a bit to this project. What do you think your work at Y4Y, how has that influenced you, especially with the Belonging Project? How important do you think this project was to these communities that you were helping out, or some of the events that you ran in Quebec?
I think very, especially during COVID times, especially with the new bill coming out. I'm still new to the province, so it feels like I want to be welcomed here. I welcome Quebec. I'm trying to find my place here. I don't want to be pushed out, and I don't feel pushed out, of course. Being able to find other Anglophones going through the same motions shows that we're not alone. Like, we are strength in numbers, and we're here to help each other out. I was unfortunately working during a lot of the activities, so I wish I was able to learn more. One of the most interesting activities I did with the Sense of Belonging Project is learning about the history of Quebec. And I live in Quebec City. There is so much history here. But because of COVID, I haven't been able to learn that history as much as I would like. And this activity, learning about the history, the wars here, that helped me learn and connect more with my community and with my city, which I'm extremely grateful for.
I think it's really important because as an outsider coming to Quebec City, it was kind of difficult to keep in contact with people who were born and raised here in Quebec City, because they had their own sets of bubbles. You know, they had their own community who they've known since elementary, high school, CEGEPs, and so forth. As an outsider, or like as someone who moved here to Quebec, I didn't really have that connection with the locals per se. But when I worked for Y4Y, that's when I got my, that's where I had the opportunity to work with the Anglophone group page, the Anglophone groups here. I communicated, one of our projects was to communicate with the seniors who have been living here for ages, and having that conversations with the locals, and also like people who are just here temporarily. It had a sense of belonging for us. Like there's that connection.
Like I've heard a lot from young people that's like they want to feel like they belong more in the community. Just like whether it's like more English activities or things that they can participate, but not only participate, but feel confident in participating. Because even like if it's a French event, I think they're nervous to go. And if it's a bilingual event, they're not 100% confident to participate. And offering these English events for them was a way for them to get involved in the community and feel confident about doing it.
Is there something that you've learned about yourself or about others, or even about just your community through this You Are Here project?
There's so much history in my region that I didn't know about. And a lot of it comes back to like my little town of like 50 people. I mean, it was a lot bigger than 50 people at some point, but I'm like the only youth left here. But just to see how much my community has grown in like a short amount of time. Like there are so many traditional ways of life that have only like disappeared in the last few decades, where we're so isolated. Like we weren't as developed as the other regions, and to see that some of these traditional things that my grandparents have done were things that have been done for a couple hundred years, and like people were here and like European settlers and French settlers and the indigenous, and it was like eye-opening kind of to see how not that far away all of that was. And I know like all of the like urban areas, it seems like it was so much further away, but around here like we still do some of those things, and it just kind of again brought me closer to my roots, or it was like, man, like this has been going on for a very long time and it's sustainable, so we're still doing it. And I thought that was really cool, like to see how the history of the region is still so important here.
Without a doubt. And I think that's a perfect way to end it off. And I think that's a perfect way to preface year 2 of belonging and seeing where this goes. And I'm really excited for the work you guys are going to be doing.
Yeah, like just feeling like you belong makes life just feel like so much more positive. And yeah, and having your community, I'm super excited for what year 2 is going to bring.
For year 2, we hope to continue introducing people to these beautiful regions with rich history, culture, and incredible communities. We aim to continue helping English-speaking Quebecers feel a sense of belonging to the province. We hope to see you for year 2 of the You Are Here Belonging Project.
So we're going to conclude this section on belonging and identity with a presentation from Learn, and here it goes. There you go.
So, who are you?
So, how old are you?
I'm 15.
Music you like?
Any kind of music. Rap, country music, classical music, pretty much anything.
So I'm queer. That's how I identify.
So, why are we interviewing this guy, Shadow? It's all transformation.
Because he wants people to know who he is.
Everyone at one point has a personal story.
I want to cultivate a sense of belonging to the school, like that we actually have like some kind of beacon that brings us together, and that was what the broadcast signal is all about, and that we start to create dialogue and create exchanges and interchanges of belonging and sharing and being together.
What's our vision? Like, what are we about?
Did you come from the South Shore?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty far. I came from the Plateau.
Held up a mirror to how we're living and what we're doing.
Made us take the time to reflect on that too.
Such a wake-up call, you know? Wake up, wake up, wake up.
It's a very huge project for me because I didn't feel welcome here at the school. So basically what we wanted to do was we wanted to spread awareness of what it's like to be queer and living as a queer person and dealing with that sort of thing, as well as the misconceptions, also the good things, right? We also wanted to celebrate everybody's differences and diversity.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You're standing up for
We
them.
are.
Yeah.
And would you like to explain your background?
Well, my parents were born in two different areas. Like my dad was in Jamaica and mom's St. Vincent. I was born in Montreal though. I live with both of my brothers in a foster home.
It's hard. It's hard. We both suffer from anxiety.
But it's mainly for people who just want to talk and get something off their chest.
What we've experienced in our school culture is like an enormous amount of atomization, like people being separated from one another, unable to come together, both physically, but also how do you get students to come together and to speak and to exchange and to share when you're so restricted, you know, in terms of your physical movement?
A place where these students are connecting and having a positive experience through the school. And part of it, I see this being a great opportunity to showcase our other I Belong projects, our other school projects.
To get a sense of what students in our school are living.
When you're like talking to somebody in person, you can hear the tremble in their voice. Either it's a tremble or just like a worry in their voice, or you could tell by the eyes. Like you need to pay attention to how people are talking, because that can really like say like a lot about a person.
My name is my identity.
That could be like a really powerful and positive discussion.
Just like that, people who do come to the school feel a little bit more accepted and supported here.
I love that.
Community.
Community. It's made me grow like in maturity. There's trust and relationship as well.
We don't really get to hear students talking about these things. That's the first one. It's rare that you get anywhere that you're going to hear a student
open up about their feelings.
Well, unless it's a one-on-one conversation, right?
Yes.
Open up about their feelings is one thing, but also really just talk about like what it's like to be them in their life.
I have so much fun creating this project. I am Alex. I am gifted. I am talented, and I am a true friend. But most importantly, I belong.
What else do you have to share about yourself for all the listeners around the world?
And now we're going to conclude this section with a short commentary by Ben and Emma.
Hello, my name is Ben Loomer.
And I'm Emma Legault.
And we are the project coordinators of LEARN's I Belong project.
When we first approached the project, we really wanted to give English-speaking youth an opportunity to reflect on what it means to belong to Quebec society. So what does it mean to fit in or to have a sense of attachment to a group or to a place? And we did a lot of research to help figure out what some of the best ways to approach the subject matter would be. And we landed pretty firmly on the arts. A lot of the research pointed to the arts as a great and powerful mechanism for entering into conversations around belonging and deepening our sense of belonging. We also looked at community service as a method for promoting and engaging in the subject of belonging.
We're really pleased to announce that we had over 1,750 students participating in the project. These students came from 12 different regions in 46 different schools.
Yeah, and over the past few months, we've been receiving a lot of feedback from students and teachers and artists about what was discussed and what some of the insights students had to share. And so we're going to highlight just a few of those for you now. And I'll kick us off just by saying that, you know, we're talking about youth in grade 5 and up. So when you're talking to students who are 11, 12 years old about Quebec society, for them, what that means is conversations about their local community, about their schools, about sporting arenas. These are often the places where youth have their first encounter with Quebec society, and it's their first sense of belonging or not to the province. Another thing that stood out to me is just around language. We assumed that language would emerge as a much more critical component in relationship to identity and belonging, but that didn't necessarily prove to be true. In fact, students who participated this school year were often more interested in discussing barriers that were tied to things like neurodiversity, gender, sexuality, and race. The last thing I would want to highlight is, you know, the kids took us back to basics. A lot of students pointed out the importance of simple gestures like kindness, saying hello, being accommodating, inclusive, celebrating people's differences, allowing space for people's differences, and how those small gestures can make the biggest difference in terms of their sense of inclusion and belonging, as well as that of others. Ben, what stood out to you?
Hearing from teachers and students, I heard that working with artists on these different options were wonderful in terms of building trust between students and teachers, different opportunities for students to come out of their shell, especially when discussing issues around identity and belonging. We also heard that the more teachers and students participated in these types of discussions, the deeper they can go. There's something about the scaffolding of starting where students are at and then building from there. These projects were wonderful in terms of supporting the mental health and wellness of students. Giving them creative outlets was really important in terms of reflecting again on where their lives are at and their sense of belonging. And lastly, I'll add that you know, in the context of COVID in schools, wearing masks, being in bubbles, these I Belong projects were really a highlight in what was otherwise described as quite a drab year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we're absolutely delighted that we're going to have the chance to do this project again next school year. We're excited to see where students and teachers take the conversation. I think it'll be an opportunity, and it's certainly our hope that the conversations will just keep going further and deeper. Ben, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'll just add that you know, these projects took place in the context of English-speaking schools, and I think it was really important that we gave students a chance to build in a culture of expression around identity and sense of belonging in ways that they may not have done before. And for that, we'd like to thank you.
Yeah, and maybe on that note, you know, we will just take a moment to thank the Secretariat for allowing us to have this opportunity, to our featured artists, to our teachers, and of course to participating youth. Thank you so much for the leadership and the courage that you brought to this project. It was so inspiring, and we can't wait to see what you have to say next school year.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ben and Emma. So this brings the first section about identity and belonging to a conclusion. Now we're turning to belonging and memory. I see Debbie has indicating clapping hands. Maybe if you want to indicate to the presenters that you like their work, you could send a hand signal or a clapping hand. We're now turning to belonging and memory, and QUESCREN, the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network. This is their major presentation because history is their major line of business. So we're going to hear from QUESCREN, then ELAN, then Seniors Action Quebec, then BCRC. So take it away, Norma.
Good afternoon. Anglophone heritage is everywhere in Quebec, from the Ottawa River to the eastern townships to the Magdalen Islands. Knowing where to look is one way historical societies and museums serve local communities. This last year, the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network, QUESCREN, worked with 10 community groups on a wide range of local projects. They will all help to ensure the stories of English Quebec continue to be a part of Canada's history. Memory places hold great meaning for all Quebecers. In small towns and rural communities, a family burial ground is often the only place to encounter this past. This is the Blackburn Pioneer Cemetery in Cantley. The Gatineau River Municipality has undergone rapid growth in recent years, and this historic site is threatened by a nearby housing development. One of the belonging projects QUESCREN supported this year was carried out by a local historical society called Cantley 1889. Cantley 1889 produced this bilingual plaque that tells about the early settlement of the area by Scottish and Irish colonists beginning in the early 19th century. Volunteers also built this walking path to the site, where a public reception will be held later this summer. We hope that municipal leaders and residents will learn to care about this history too. The community is currently working with local authorities to gain some legal protection for the site under Quebec's cultural heritage law. One of Quebec's oldest English-speaking communities is situated on the Magdalen Islands, where QUESCREN's partner, the Council for Anglophone Magdalen Islanders, or CAMI, operates 3 seasonal museums. Many families trace their history on the archipelago back 2.5 centuries. Over the years, CAMI has amassed a significant collection of historic artifacts, but lacked skills and tools for their proper conservation. Our Belonging Project helped the community document the provenance of artifacts in each museum and organize this information into a searchable database. The registry will help residents and future researchers gain better access to materials documenting Anglophone heritage on the islands. Enhancing collection spaces and creating a digital registry of these objects will support the English-speaking community's dream of establishing an accredited museum of their own. Magdalen Islanders have made significant strides toward this goal thanks to the Belonging Project. Down on Quebec's border with New York State, we were also pleased to work with a group of heritage volunteers whose efforts to celebrate local history exemplify how local cultural institutions help keep communities vital. Members of the Hemingford Archives have been collecting, preserving, and sharing knowledge about local history for more than 30 years, yet the group didn't even have a home of its own until 3 years ago. Thanks to private and public donors and many volunteers like Myrna Paquette, Hemingford is now home to one of the best managed community archives in the province. A refurbished church hall in the center of the village with modern research facilities and plenty of room for public gatherings. Here, local residents and visitors are going to be able to admire 2 brand new history displays thanks to the archive's participation in our Belonging Project. One set of banners explores historic buildings, people, and places from the past. What a great way to show how local archives can support lifelong learning in our communities. Another pair of banners traces and celebrates Hemingford's legacy as one of Quebec's foremost apple-growing regions, dating back more than 2 centuries. Myrna said it best, I think. Communities thrive where people learn from each other. While COVID was shuttering cultural sites around the province, the Colby Curtis Museum switched to other means of engaging visitors. With funding from the Belonging Project, staff developed 2 bilingual self-guided walking tours that will be accessible to anyone with a smartphone starting this summer. Owned and operated by the Stansted Historical Society, the museum is housed in an iconic granite mansion built in 1860 for the family of Charles Colby. Colby was a lawyer and parliamentarian whose career spanned more than 2 decades. One of the museum's smartphone tours is dedicated to the story of his home, known as Carrollcroft. A second walking tour leads to points of interest in nearby Rock Island, where the Tomophobia once powered factories able to support communities on both sides of the international boundary. A strong sense of cross-border kinship between Derby Line, Vermont and Rock Island continues to this day. They say necessity is the mother of invention. In Stansted, Quan's heritage partners adapted to the pandemic and created new tools for showing and understanding that there's history all around us. Celebrating diversity was certainly the inspiration behind a new outdoor mural in the town of Richmond on the St. Francis River in the Eastern Townships. This ambitious project grew out of a partnership between the Richmond County Historical Society and the local St. Patrick's Society. The mural is a tribute to different immigrant families who put down roots in the area over the last 2 centuries, including those of Irish, Dutch, and French ancestry. Through the Belonging Project, Quan was able to support this worthy and original initiative. Though Francophones make up the majority of local residents nowadays, heritage projects like these affirm the English-speaking community's place in culture and education in Quebec. We are also pleased that members of the Abenaki First Nation at Odanak contributed to the mural's design. Artwork is expected to be completed over the course of the summer. Small museums have to work hard at the best of times to catch people's attention. COVID has made the challenge even greater. For its Belonging project, the Missisquoi Museum planned to take its show on the road, getting folks out in 3 different communities for a series of talks and panel discussions with local historians. But with a ban on social gatherings for much of the last year, the series producers were forced to switch to an online format. These virtual tours turned out to be a great hit in both official languages. One of the few silver linings of the pandemic for heritage workers is that so many groups have gained new skills for delivering their programming online. Of course, nothing compares with historic sites in person. This covered bridge near Lennoxville, destroyed in 2002, sadly, was one of 8 landmarks featured in a set of information panels created by the Lennoxville Historical and Museum Society 30 years ago. In the mid-19th century, the bridge served the village of Capleton, one of several mining settlements in the area. Weather has damaged these panels over time, and the information they contain has become difficult to read, and in some cases in need of updating. With support from our Belonging Project, the Historical Society is repairing or replacing all of their panels in the Greater Sherbrooke region and neighboring town of Waterville. The work list includes historic sites and buildings in the settlements of Huntingville, Milby, and Capleton. Plus, an entirely new information panel is going up at the busy junction of the St. Francis Street Bridge and College Street across from Bishop's University. The panel tells how the St. Francis River contributed to the history and pattern of development in this area. A dedication ceremony is planned for the spring.
If I go back to grade 2 or grade 3, I remember being told that I could no longer walk to school. It was an 8 or a 10 block walk because mailboxes were blowing up in our neighborhood. So that was probably my first experience with that, and I had no idea where that was coming from.
I remember, of course, the famous kidnapping of Cross. That's when I think it affected me. I lived on Penfield at the time, and I was teaching at Darcy McGee, and I remember walking along Dr. Penfield and sometimes on Pine and seeing the guards, the soldiers out, and that was, I found, intimidating.
I guess fast forward to when I was in high school, and all of a sudden James Cross was kidnapped, and the Rose brothers kidnapped Pierre Laporte was his name. I think I was in grade 9 or grade 10 then, and I remember a friend of mine, René Balse, walking down a street to go visit a friend of his in Westmount, and being accosted by military from BC, asking, "What are you doing here? Who are you? Who are you going to see?" And all of these questions, and then a whole slew of people being thrown in jail because of the the FLQ crisis?
Well, I came back to Canada in the 70s from graduate school from Berkeley. And one of the first things I did was vote for René Lévesque because he seemed like the most intelligent person running. And at the time, I hadn't really considered the consequences, which were all the doors shut in my face, regardless of my fluency in French.
It was a scary time because the conspiracies were abound. Like once we get separated, all the immigrants will lose their houses. It'll be our houses. That was the kind of thing we heard in the neighborhood. Of course, you know, that kind of conspiracy. So it was scary for my parents. It was scary for me.
Coming from a country where Argentina, which was a mess economically, politically, we said, you know what, we're here now. Let's take it as it comes. Let's do the best of it. My father was very scared to lose his job.
For our family, and I'd probably say, you know, much of the Chinese community, 70s and 80s, sadness. 90s, fear. You know, many of my colleagues who I grew up with. Fear. 90s, le vote ethnique. Palais du Congrès. That's right next to Chinatown. We had armed police at that time because we were afraid that I'd moved to Montreal by that time, that there was going to be like racial violence. Because once again, you know, for the Chinese community, race is always a problem. But then to put, you know, political persecution on top of that, because we were perceived as being, you know, against the Francophone movement, that was very scary, especially for those that fled communist China to begin with because of political persecution.
La vote ethnique et l'argent. And so now it is to a point that when government, and I'm not talking about my relation with the people, I'm talking about the government thing. Because the government thing to me, I think, is very different. It's about power, it's about keeping power and getting elected. And so now whenever any of that group says anything to me about having positive relations with the English community, what I hear in my head is, well, moi je me souviens aussi, hein. Je me souviens de ce soir-là. Je me souviens que à un moment donné, tu disais que je pouvais pas parler français. Et là, maintenant que je te parle en français, tu dis, ah, ton accent, c'est pas assez. T'es pas assez québécois pour nous.
I just want to say a few words here as ELAN's project manager. This Waves of Change project is a 200-year oral history from 1820 to 2020, filmed on the 50th anniversary of the FLQ crisis. We asked all of the participants to indicate their sense of belonging in their local community, as we saw in the previous video. We asked them to indicate their sense of belonging in Quebec, and we asked them to indicate their sense of belonging in Canada. In every group, the weakest sense of belonging was associated with Quebec, but the degree varied from group to group. The families that arrived prior to 1945 felt a weaker sense of belonging in Quebec than people who arrived after 1970 or people who arrived after 1995. The group that felt the weakest attachment to Quebec were those who arrived between 1945 and 1970. They found themselves caught in a battle between French-speaking settlers and so-called British WASPs, although few of them were British, white, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant. They were innocent bystanders who got caught in a war that was not theirs. So what is the best way to deal with uncomfortable stories? Well, we can deny them or try to forget them, or we can contend with these living experiences and try to understand what we can learn from them. You know, I see it as a very hopeful sign that this project about identity and belonging was initiated by the recently created Secrétariat for Relations with English-speaking Quebecers. I truly hope the government of Quebec takes a close look at these projects and carefully considers what they reveal about the English-speaking communities as they exist today. And now we're going to move on to our next video. So let it go, Norma, please.
When you're involved in everything, you're belonging to the community. When there is nothing, the church shuts down. You know, bit by bit, things closed down. And the centre was handed over to the town to manage from the mine. And bit by bit it closes. Things seem to be, to me, I don't know, gradually winding down here. Eventually, if it goes on this way, there won't be an English community here at all. People are getting older, and the young people don't come back anymore. They find jobs elsewhere once they leave university. So bit by bit, you can see it's gradually dying. Which is sad in a way, because it was a very vibrant community when we first moved here. Everything was go, 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 and all sorts of organizations and groups of things, and bit by bit, they've gone. Looking back on it, I've been very lucky. I had an early Quebec, I've got a later Quebec, and everything in between. So I don't think there are many people that have perhaps done that. I don't know.
This town of Shawbridge was very, very heavily English at one time, and I've seen it diminish myself. It's going down all the time. Our church, actually, we used to be like 20, 25 people, and we started a Boy Scout, Girl Guides, choir. We did food baskets. We still have food basket ministries. So it was an very, very active, busy. We had a lot of francophones coming into our church. So when there was francophones there, we'd have prayers in French, we'd have hymns in French, and we'd do both. But now all the kids are grown up and moved away, and I used to be one of the younger. Now I'm one of the older. But the church was thriving. But right now it's on a low for the Anglophones in this area. But we're still here.
We're going to end this section on belonging and memory with a video from BCRC, the Black Community Resource Center.
I'm going back in time to talk about belonging and my contribution to the collaborative efforts with BCRC and of course my beloved WESCREN Folk Performing Company of Montreal. When they first asked me to tell a story, I didn't want to. Mommy had died, and we had to shoot it the day before the funeral. And of course, I was fearing going to the funeral. But more importantly, a memory came up to me, and memory is tied to belonging.
And I think what I have to add is I recently lost my mom. It's 9 days. 9 days ago. And as I went through that process with my sister, all of my sisters, her story and our lives came flashing in her head. It's still in my head, because when somebody passed and you hear somebody pass, the memories come back to you in video.
Yeah.
And then I went and take up myself and gone in the lady house and looking at all of her pictures, right? I even had one chin at one time. I did forget about that part of my story. And then the stories come out. And I know last February and early March, we said to some women here in Montreal, don't wait until you die for your children to sit down in the funeral to hear your stories. Get a copybook. Get some foolscap. Children, for those of you who don't know what is foolscap, go and ask mommy and daddy what is foolscap. What is a copybook? If you're Canadian born like me, go and get the Hilroy notebook and start writing your narratives. All the incidents, because we heard a lot of them in that workshop. And particularly as Black women living in a Quebec context, where they don't always want to hear the truth from us. So we watch them and we watch them lick up into the wall, and we don't even say, I told you so. But that too many times has been too many of the older Black woman stories, and women my age, 55. I think for young people, I don't know. I have to take a pulse of that nation. And that narrative, when you hit that ceiling and you can't talk, because you're not allowed to talk, how are you going to get it out? So that's what we're going to study today. Story time?
Story time.
And of course, the memory resulted in a story. So I was able, despite what I was going through, to commit that happy, funny memory. And it was hilarious, because Ma thought she won $1 million. And to come here despite and do it. And essentially that's what memory is. In Canada, there is a famous story written by Roch Carrier about Maurice Richard. There's a film about it, and everybody knows it, including me, who was born here, first generation Canadian of Jamaican descent. Where are those stories of us who are born here, who are not Québécois or Canadian white, or perhaps our brethren and sisters who are Indigenous, to whom we owe respect because we're sitting on their land? Where are our stories? How can our stories resonate more so or as equally to Roch Carrier's story? So belonging the project and my contributions helped me contribute to the literary works that Black Canadians, whether they hail from Africa, the Caribbean, or they were here as far back as the 1600s, create work that goes into the pool. And now, because it's digital, people around the world know it, not only Canada, because it's all interconnected. Narrative, memory. We belong here, make no mistake. We helped to build this place. And despite the fact that they messed us up equally, like they messed up the Indigenous peoples, the results of the Berlin Conference, we, like them, built the place. Belonging and memory. That's what belonging and memory is all about. That's what it's all about.
And now we're going to conclude this presentation with a couple of short videos about belonging and language. And we're going to start it off by Quad. So let it go, Norma.
Local history brings us together. In many Quebec regions where English communities are in decline, Francophones are learning, sharing, and caring for Anglophone heritage. A good example is the Société d'Histoire du Canton d'Orford, a mostly Francophone volunteer group and member of the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network. The group was able to carry out several activities with support of our Belonging Project, including this bilingual display of never-before-shown archival photos in Old Cherry River Village, close to Orford Park. English-speaking colonists were drawn to the area as early as 1801, and some of their descendants still live in Orford Township. The Historical Society researched stories of early immigration for a series of bilingual exhibition banners that will be on display in the community starting this summer. Research focused on three groups: New Englanders, immigrants from the British Isles, and French Canadians arriving from elsewhere in Quebec. One of the new exhibition banners tells about the origins and identity of the first settler families. Another introduces two remarkable Irish women who beat the odds and held on to their homesteads as widows in the mid-1800s. After the pandemic forced cancellation of a highly anticipated walking tour last fall, the Orford Historical Society showcased local historic sites online. Our partnership with Orford's Société d'Histoire illustrates a principle that has guided QUESCREN for more than 20 years. The history of Anglophone Quebec is part of our shared heritage in this province, quelle que soit la langue qu'on parle. French-English relations tend to dominate Quebec's public historical imagination. Along the Gaspé coast, where many Anglophones trace their roots to Loyalist settlement in the 18th century, two remarkable German immigrants are now also being remembered. That's thanks to a non-profit group in the town of New Carlisle that partnered with QUESCREN on our Belonging project. Heritage New Carlisle operates the Kempfer Cultural Interpretation Centre, housed in this historic Victorian residence. It was built in 1868 for a descendant of the first Kempfer who settled on the Baie des Chaleurs back in the 1780s. With QUESCREN's support, the group has created a large, permanent, outdoor interpretation panel that tells about Friedrich Ludwig Kempfer's journey to Canada as a soldier of fortune on the British Empire's payroll. Kempfer and another soldier, William von den Velden, were among the 30,000 or so German mercenaries hired by the English to help fight rebel forces during the American Revolution. Von den Velden also settled in Canada after the war. He drew up land surveys for Gaspésian settlers and served for many years as Justice of Peace in the region. He also ran a printing business and even served a term as the Gaspé representative in Quebec's Legislative Assembly. A second interpretation panel at the Kempfer Centre tells about his legacy. These and other immigrant stories from across Quebec remind us that our cultural heritage has many origins. I'm going to finish with an excerpt from a video made by the English community organization of Lanaudière, which documents the story and recent destruction by local authorities of the Mascouche Seigneurie. I encourage you to watch the whole documentary. Sadly, it shows our society's ongoing failure to save historic buildings and heritage sites in Quebec. And if you can this summer, please consider visiting your local museum and support the work that heritage workers do in your community. Thank you.
In 1795, a star was born. Me. Peter Pangman even named me Grace Hall in honor of his wife. Life was good, because this is when there was a beginning of something of a village. In 1927, an important historian changed the course of my life by publishing this book about historical houses where we appeared. What made Mrs. Colville fall so deeply in love with me after reading that book, I'm not sure. One thing I know is that she wanted me badly. I became this arts and crafts inspired manoir that won the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada's first prize for restoration of residences. Some newspapers were citing us as one of the most beautiful estates in North America. After an evaluation of the heritage potential mandated by the City of Mascouche and the Ministry of Culture, the Historical Society of Terrebonne presented a project that would have prevented what happened to me last fall. On November 16th, 2020, I died. You know, I was the superstar of Mascouche. Everything is or was named after me there. A school, a municipal district, a case pup. I have welcomed film shootings, a Canadian Prime Minister, and the royal family of Luxembourg. If this wasn't enough to protect me, what is? Unless you think a plaque can do the trick?
Thank you, Quan. That's a great video. So we're going to conclude with Seniors Action Quebec. So take it away, Norma.
I grew up in a house. My father was an immigrant. He arrived from Turkey in 1947. My father spoke English as his fifth language, my mother as her second language. So a family get-together, like a Passover Seder, was always fun because we'd be 30 people around the table, 8 different languages, and you could only speak to the person farthest away from you. It was natural. It wasn't even a plaything. It was just part of the world around us, that we used different languages to speak to different people. We were totally unconscious of language, except once we started school, we were divided into the Protestant school and the English Catholic school and the French Catholic school. And we never talked to those other children again, the ones who weren't in our school. And that's when language consciousness developed. I was pretty frustrated by the divisions because I had grown up so cosmopolitan that to see narrow-mindedness of any sort, religious, political, language, was something I always fought back against.
This idea of a society that is a kind of an experiment in North America, I think I got really excited about that, and how it could exist in French, how it could you can create in French, dream in French, and so on. And so I became less worried about saving Canada, if you like, and more interested in becoming part of what was going on in Quebec. One of the things that I really appreciate about Montreal and about Quebec in general is that you feel that there is a discussion, a society-wide discussion about the type of place, the type of life that people want to lead as a collective entity. And so there's all kinds of debates about what kind of history should we be learning, how are we going to organize things, and what are the ways of keeping in touch with our roots but growing in a modern context, and so on.
I have found through my life quite often when I've been in other provinces visiting friends that I realize I'm much more of a Quebecer than I ever thought myself to be. But I also think I really dislike nationalism. And I think if Quebec had separated, I don't think I would have wanted to live in, it has nothing to do with the French language or people, but I would not have wanted to live in such a nationalist state.
I don't know. I think people of good faith really have to come forward and say enough is enough. We can't afford to live in a society that is split along something as small, as negligible, and as pitiful as language. We have so much more in common than we have that separates us. I think my great-grandparents were the first Anglophones to settle, to have a house, a summer house in this community. My grandparents had been married here in 1916, and both families came from Quebec City and for the wedding. Throughout my life, Even when I worked at Lake Louise, I always came back here for at least a day or two, because it was, as they say, le retour au bercail.
All right, so this brings our presentations to an end. If you want, you can turn your cameras back on. We're going to have a short Q&A if people have questions to ask. Here are the contact information for our communications consultant, the different project managers. But of course, Christopher Skeet is also available. I believe he's still with us to answer questions if you want to talk to him about the Secretariat's plans, or William Flock. So first of all, I would just like to thank all of the presenters, and I would particularly like to thank Hugh Maynard and Norman Tolhurst for the technological expertise of making this whole thing run very smoothly. So it's been a long session. I hope you've realized how diverse and how complicated this English-speaking community, or these English-speaking communities, are. We're talking about something in the order of 1 million people, and every one of those people has a story, which gets more and more complex as you branch back through parents, grandparents, and go up the tree. It's never simple as it is sometimes portrayed of us versus them, black and white, two solitudes. Much more complex. And this is the story that we are trying to tell. So I'm presuming that you all saw these projects. I mean, they're very interesting projects. They barely scratched the surface of the work that was done last year. Next year, we're going to be doing different things altogether. So I guess now is the time. Each of the groups has just a few seconds to describe their project they're working on this year. So we're going to start with BCRC. So Samantha, can you tell us what you're working on for this year?
Absolutely. Thank you, Guy, and everybody else who's made this possible. In phase 2, BCRC will partner with 2 English-speaking Black community organizations to produce a series of projects that will explore belonging and identity from the perspective of the English-speaking Black youth, artists, and family. Our first partner will be Youth in Motion, who will create a project called 21 Youths Calling. The project aims to foster a sense of belonging for English-speaking Black youths. Our second partner will be Black Theatre Workshops, who will create a series of workshops for English-speaking Black writers to create personal reflections that will explore what it means to be a Black Anglophone in Quebec. And the BCRC will also carry out a project that will entail a video series that explores belonging and identity across 3 generations of English-speaking Black Quebecois from the same family. And we're looking forward to bringing that to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Very good. So Kathleen, you're going to say a few words about Y for Y and your current project.
Yes, thank you, Guy, and thanks everyone for joining. Y for Y is really excited to adopt a very similar structure as we did last year. We'll be getting our cultural youth ambassadors back into the regions that they call home, with the goal of kind of getting them in the grounds and understanding their space within the communities and how they can make that feel like a space that they feel part of and they can contribute to. So we're going to do that through a myriad of activities that'll be on the ground and really locally based, which is what we did last year. But hopefully, crossing our fingers, some of this will be in person and young people will have the chance to connect directly with their natural environments, the cultural and historical places that define the very unique aspect of the region. So part of that is intergenerational. Part of that is looking at the migration of youth between provinces, whether they're born in Quebec or out of country, and seeing how we can continue to connect them to the linguistic roots of the province while connecting them as well with their Francophone partners.
Good, thank you, Kathleen. So now Vanessa is going to say a few words about Seniors Action Quebec.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So we're going to be building on the idea of telling the stories of seniors from around the province, which we did in the first series. I encourage you to go to our website and watch the full stories because they really are quite riveting. And we're going to speak to a few of our unsung heroes, and those are the people out in the regions and in Montreal who really work to build a sense of belonging with our seniors, and that's the community groups. So we're going to be telling their stories and the different challenges from different parts of Quebec of how do you build a sense of belonging facing the challenges that is unique to your area. So we're really looking forward to it. I'm really hoping that the pandemic lets us go to places so we can speak to more people and do some less drone shots. But, you know, we'll have to see how it goes. Thanks.
The drone shots looked great, by the way. Now we're going to Dwayne from Quan.
Hi, first of all, I just want to say I'm so impressed and proud of all of you. You did amazing work, and this was the first time I actually got to see the results of all of your individual projects. This samples of, so great job. Congratulations to all of you. Quan is going to belonging project, which will be I guess a reprise of what we did in year one, in that we ask our member organizations to tell us what their priorities are. We will begin probably in the next couple of weeks having discussions with our member groups to see what their priorities are. We will address this question of belonging identity through what we believe is their interest with sharing local history. We believe that community museums and historical societies and cultural venues require extra resources to do this job, which is essentially to demonstrate that Anglophones, English speakers, have stories that they need to see about themselves and their communities where they live. History is between 7 and grade 11 in high school. It's something that is lifelong. All of us need to learn it. We learn it in our communities every day, and local museums and historical societies are doing that job. We will support them in year 2, just as we did in year 1. That's all I can tell you for now, but look for more local historical society and museum projects from us, thanks to the Belonging Project in year 2.
Thank you, Dwayne. And now Debbie's going to describe or give us a preview of LEARN's project for the current year.
Thanks, Guy. The com-unity project really came along at an extremely challenging time in the education system. And LEARN's I Belong project was described by many of the teachers who participated as an asset to promoting students' mental health and engagement at school this year. So they're really important. In year 2, students will continue to explore their identity and sense of belonging to Quebec society through the arts, and they're going to have 5 project options for teachers to choose from. Spoken word, which you saw a few of them today, allows students to explore the relationship between identity and belonging through spoken word, and this will culminate in a poetry slam with the featured artists acting as judges. Digital storytelling was the most popular option we offered this year, and it gives students the chance to learn all aspects of creating a digital story, from photography, storytelling, storyboarding, video editing, music creation, and then how to pull it all together. And some of those stories have been, as you saw today, can be quite powerful. Comic Zine is an intergenerational option where students connect with seniors from their community to learn more about their contributions and connections to Quebec society. And then they turn those stories into the foundation of a student-led creation of a comic zine, which is then presented back to the seniors. But we're also going to be adding 2 new options, so this should be interesting. Puppeteering will allow students to explore identity and belonging through puppeteering with guidance from professional artists. And finally, something we're calling Let's Talk About New. And we want to create the opportunity for English and French-speaking youth to come together and develop podcast episodes that explore the themes of identity and belonging in Quebec society. We are really looking forward to an exciting year ahead, and we want to thank the Secretariat for funding these projects and for your ongoing support of English community-based programming.
Thank you, Debbie. So for the first phase of Waves of Change, ELAN interviewed more than 50 people to produce 6 videos, which barely scratched the surface of the lively conversations that we filmed. The 50th anniversary of the FLQ crisis was a perfect time to interview eyewitnesses of the turbulent days of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and to think about how they shaped the world we live in now, as experienced by dozens of people who are younger or recent arrivals who also were interviewed for the project. The project for year 2 is to create a feature-length documentary that brings together all of the storylines from the 17 hours of interviews and put them in context. The English-speaking communities, and that means all of the families that stayed in Quebec during those years of turmoil, and all of the people who have arrived since 1970 have made enormous efforts to adapt to this new social contract. Most of us have learned to speak French adequately. We older folks have made sure that our kids learn to speak French better than we did. And an astonishing number of us are in romantic relationships with Francophones. This is some kind of weird survival strategy, but it seems to be pretty effective. So the feature-length documentary that ELAN is creating this year will try to bury some pernicious myths, and it will portray a dynamic and diverse community that we should all be proud of. So that's it for our presentations. I'd like to leave the final word to our host and our sponsor and our funder and our benefactor, Mr. William Flock. Would you like to conclude for us?
I'll be very quick because it's been nearly 2 hours we've been on together. I thank everybody for their patience, but I think all of us were kind of blown away with really the creativity that's been unleashed through this project. It's not all sort of celebration and happy stories. People talk about challenges, some of the problems they're facing in the past and in the present and future. But I think I feel very proud to have been able to, through the Secretariat, to support this project. I think that, how would I put it? What came through for me was the level of creativity, which really the production values, the quality of that end of things surpassed my expectations. But I think even more importantly is the feeling of authenticity, that people told their stories without being steered towards anything other than what came up from their lives and their experiences. So I thank everybody for the kind of sincerity and the honesty. And I think there is at different points a kind of a challenge to government to say how we take this on, how we respond to it, and it's not simple, but I can tell you that it's a very important project from our point of view, and we will learn from it. So I thank everybody who put so much into it, and I, like you, I look forward to year 2, and then we can take stock. So thank you, everybody. And I'd really like to thank QUESCREN and Concordia for being a great partner in difficult circumstances to get this thing up and going. It's been wonderful. So thank you, Lorraine O'Donnell and company. And I'd like to thank my team as well. Many of my team are here today, and we thought it was a great opportunity for them to get a great insight into the English-speaking community. So I think 9 or 10 of people from the Secretariat staff are here today. So I'll be debriefing with them, but I think we probably really enjoyed the close and personal look that we've been granted by all of you. Thank you.
So this is not goodbye, it is just au revoir. Will be to be continued. So thank you for joining us.